kind of amazing, and I'm sure a little bit troubling as well. Today, this morning at 8:30, they rolled the number on the jobs number, and we also saw the unemployment number. And when I first saw the jobs number, there appeared to be a big upside surprise, and then I saw the unemployment number, and there was some conflicting data in my mind between the two. And since I'm not an economist and I can barely figure out the stock market on any given day, we reached out to the Vince Coglianese in-house economist EJ Antoni over at Heritage, and he's joining us today. EJ, welcome to the show again, sir.
Mike, thank you for having me again.
It's our pleasure. The Friday jobs numbers that rolled showed a couple of things. Number one, this big spike in the new jobs, and it was like 270,000 and change. And some of the reports I saw said that was a, quote, massive upside surge in the expected number. Was that really a big surprise, and are there any hidden stories inside that number?
Oh, there's a huge hidden story inside of it, which is that the numbers at this point is just garbage. You know, one of the things that these statisticians who come up with these figures might have to deal with is the fact that they can't actually take a census every single month of all the businesses in the country to get an accurate count of how many payrolls there are. And so they end up having to do, essentially a survey, and then from that try to extrapolate how many jobs there are. But one of the things that they've really struggled with post-pandemic is something called the birth-death model, which is basically just looking at trying to figure out how many businesses are starting up and how many businesses are dying, or how many firms are going out of business, and therefore how many jobs are getting added and how many jobs are we losing based on just those two activities. And that model has been wildly off after the pandemic, and there's a lot of reasons for that, such as businesses that have been added since the pandemic are not adding anywhere near as many jobs as they were beforehand. Also, there's been a huge surge in business applications, but that doesn't mean the businesses are actually going to ultimately get started and hire people. So to make a long story endless, you're looking at jobs reports over the last several months where you can essentially say all of the jobs that were added are attributed to the problems in this one part of the model. I mean, it's terrible. These are completely unreliable figures at this point.
Well, that's kind of disheartening, because we get garbage data. That means the information that comes out of that data is, as you've kind of said, garbage as well. Where can we get reliable data on what's going on in the economy?
Well, one of the things that we can do is we can look at a lot of private sector data, and that has been showing that the economy is definitely slowing down. In fact, some of it shows at this point the economy has ground to a halt and isn't even growing at all. But if we want to stick with the numbers in this report, we should remember that while there's that survey of businesses, there's also a survey of households. And the survey of households is just asking people, look, are you employed or not? It's not asking a business how many payrolls do you have, and that's an important distinction, Mike, because if I'm asking a business how many people do you have on your payroll, and then I ask another business the same question, and you have people who work for both businesses because they're working multiple jobs, they get double counted. And so if you ask actual people, like we do in the survey of households, are you employed or not, you don't have to worry about that double counting problem. And sure enough, that survey shows employment fell over 400,000 last month, as opposed to going up almost 300,000. So that's quite a disparity, and it's a continuation of a divergence we have seen between those two surveys, where the survey of businesses keeps going up and up and up and up, and the survey of households just isn't keeping up. That's something that started, Mike, all the way back in June of 2022 and has continued to this day. It's just getting worse.
What troubles me is the lack of honesty about these numbers. And when we say the 270,000 jobs that they say were created, and then you're reporting that it's 400,000 have gone away, and we also see the numbers of part-time jobs are increasing while full-time jobs are just disappearing. Where are we going to go to get straight data if the government isn't giving it from us? I know you said there's a couple of private sources, but I'm not actually seeing it on the financial channels either, EJ. Are you?
No, not really. And see, this is why you have to go to the Vince Coglianese Show with the in-house economist EJ Antoni, because it's the only place you get this kind of information, right? Look, hey, I'm. There's a reason why I have no social life. It's because I always dig through all these reports, so you don't have to. But anyway, Mike, you're absolutely right. We're basically at this point, I mean, not just shedding, we are hemorrhaging full-time jobs, and we're just gaining part-time jobs. So all of these jobs that the government keeps talking about, like, oh yeah, things are great, we're adding all these jobs. No, we're not. We're adding MIC jobs. You're seeing gig work. You're not seeing traditional full-time work with benefits, et cetera. The economy lost 625,000 full-time jobs last month. That doesn't seem like a really great labor market to me. And if you want to go back, again, this is not something that's just unique to the month of May. This has been going on a while, since June of 2023. So June of last year, we're only talking 11 months. We've lost 1.5 million, 1.5 million full-time jobs. That's terrible. But part-time jobs just keep marching up and up and up. Why? Well, a couple of reasons. One is these people are losing full-time work, and so they're having to go out and get a job to replace, that lost income. But being unable to find full-time work, they're typically getting multiple part-time jobs. On top of that, even if you haven't lost your full-time job, there are a lot of folks out there, it's measured in the millions, a lot of Americans today who are getting a part-time job on top of their full-time job in an effort to make ends meet. I mean, this is not good, but the problem is, again, going back to that double counting idea, every time we keep adding these additional part-time jobs, even if it's somebody who's already employed, it's counted as another payroll. And the government uses that. They cite that every month as look at all the jobs we're adding.
It's really disturbing. It's very disturbing. I wonder, though, EJ Antoni, is there bubbling underneath some hope, some positivity that the economy, while seemingly chugging at a slower pace right now, is developing a broader base where we will see jobs growing in different industries? If we'll see now, this administration likes to say that they're bringing manufacturing back. So I'm sure that if we dive into where the job growth was in the last year, we're going to see manufacturing going through the roof, right?
Oh, I wish. Unfortunately, manufacturing has really not done very well. They've actually been one of the laggers where they have added jobs over the last year, but I mean, it wasn't even 50,000. This is pretty terrible. They're down there with transportation and warehousing. That was another one, less than 50,000 jobs added, and that's particularly troubling because both of those are they tend to start losing jobs before the broader economy does. Now it looks like they haven't started losing jobs yet, but we'll see. In terms of where the jobs are actually being added, if those traditional blue-collar, high-paying jobs, if it's not there, where is it? It's all government. And I want to distinguish, Mike, there's direct hiring, what you might call, where the government is literally just hiring a person. You work for the government directly. But there's also something I like to call indirect hiring by the government. And we see this predominantly in the healthcare sector, where the government is essentially giving money to a company within the healthcare sector. It could be a hospital, let's say, and that hospital is taking that money and they're using it maybe to hire a nurse. Well, if that nurse's salary is being paid for with taxpayer dollars, that's essentially the same as a government job, except that instead of it saying the federal government on your pay stub, it says ABC Hospital. And so you have direct hiring by government and indirect hiring by government. It's all paid for with taxpayer dollars, and it's accounted for about 60% of all the employment gains that we've had over the last year. I mean, how is that sustainable?
Well, it's not, because you can't just rely on government for jobs, which then create tax payments to the government. You need private industry. Where are we in private industry hiring? I know I know the healthcare industry seems to be doing pretty well because every time I turn on TV, there's some ad for something in the pharmaceutical industry or in healthcare. So I assume that's going on. But do we have any growth in areas like construction, home building, apartment building? We hear everywhere that home prices are too high and apartment rent is too high, which seems like that would stimulate the building of more single-family homes and or more apartments.
We actually have seen some construction growth over the last year. That's very welcome news, somewhere around 250,000. Again, that's really, really good news because those are at least some of those good-paying blue-collar jobs. Unfortunately, what we're seeing a whole heck of a lot more of are low-paying jobs, part-time jobs, and things like leisure and hospitality. That sector added over 400,000 over the last year, so much more than the jobs like we see in construction. And again, you're talking about jobs that are typically low pay and very often are not even full time. So this goes back to what we were saying earlier with this huge surge in full-time jobs and a huge surge in part-time jobs and a loss on net of full-time jobs.
We're talking with EJ Antoni, of course, from Heritage and the official economist of the Vince Coglianese Show. EJ, when we look at this massive people who've come to the country, the invasion of illegals, as I like to call it, how are they affecting the job market? How many of the 8 to 12 million, and by some estimates, have already found a way into the job market, and what kind of effect does that have?
Well, unfortunately, BLS does not break down the data looking at foreign-born workers in terms of who is here legally and illegally. Now, a couple other people have tried to estimate that. I saw one report over the last year that estimated that given the fact that literally all of the net job growth over the last year has gone exclusively to foreign-born workers, native-born Americans have actually lost jobs on net over the last year. Looking at all of those job gains to foreign-born workers, estimates are that about half of that is illegals. But that aside, if we want to just stick to strictly the data from the Department of Labor, the native-born American population, they have basically had zero job growth going all the way back to before the pandemic. So on net, there are literally fewer of them working today than there were a little more than 4 years ago. Conversely, if you look at foreign-born workers, they not only got back to pre-pandemic employment levels, they did that, I think, back in 2021. They're all the way back to the pre-pandemic trend. In other words, they are millions above their pre-pandemic level. Now, the native-born population should be there as well, but they've been completely left behind in this economic recovery.
And there's no way to really judge why that has happened, why that discrepancy exists.
Well, I think part of it has to do with the fact as you continue to import this flood of incredibly cheap labor, businesses would be out of their mind not to hire those folks because they're willing to work for much lower pay. But one of the phenomenons that happens when you do have these huge influxes of very cheap labor is that it really chills investment. Because why would I invest, let's say I own a factory. Why would I invest in a bunch of machinery and equipment to make my workers more productive and make me more money when I can just replace them with a bunch of even cheaper workers who, because I'm paying them so little, I don't really care that they work inefficiently. I don't care necessarily that they're maybe working on an assembly line doing things by hand instead of working with a power tool that I'd have to buy because I'm paying them so little. But if I have to actually pay my workers more, I'll invest in them. I'll invest in plants, equipment, machinery, et cetera, and that creates higher productivity, higher wage growth, et cetera. But we're kind of short-circuiting that entire mechanism, that whole interplay between capital and labor, because we're just simply importing cheap labor instead.
Yeah, it all makes sense when you break it down like that, and that loss of the investment into your own business and the equipment that then supports it, which supports other industries, that's all vanishing, evaporating. One more quick one here, EJ Antoni. The unemployment rate hitting 4%. It's been in the threes for a long time. We thought 3%, and that 3.7, 3.8% was a really good thing. With all these jobs, this job upward surprise, I would have expected the unemployment rate to go down. Why does it go up, and should we be worried?
Well, again, this goes back to those two different surveys that we started the conversation talking about. So that survey of businesses, that doesn't give us an unemployment rate, because to get an unemployment rate, we need to know the number of unemployed and the total size of the labor force. So we get those numbers from the survey of households. And sure enough, the survey of households is where we saw that big drop in the number of people employed. We also saw people just giving up and leaving the labor force entirely. And what's interesting here, Mike, is that if you look at all of the literally millions of people who have left the labor force since the economy was first shut down in early 2020, they left and they have never come back. Those people are still unemployed to this day, but they're not counted as unemployed. So, and they're also not counted in the labor force. But if we put all of those unemployed people back into the category of unemployed, if we add them back into the labor force and we recalculate that unemployment rate, it's not 4%. It's somewhere between 6.5 and 8.0%. In other words, it could be as much as twice the official number. Now, the range there, that 6.5 to 8%, that depends on exactly how you want to measure the people missing from the labor force. There's a few different methodologies to try to estimate that. But the fact remains, there are far more unemployed people today than we're being led on to by these official government statistics.
The interesting thing is the administration will probably make a statement about these numbers, and the people who are most affected by the economy, the people who don't have full-time jobs or who have lost jobs and just given up, they're the ones who understand the reality behind this economy, and they're the ones who probably are going to make a serious effect on the election in 150 days. EJ Antoni, always a pleasure, always educational. Appreciate you being there, sir. And follow EJ on Twitter, at Real EJ Antoni. You'll find him. You'll see the graphs are there, and he breaks it down for you, and he breaks it down for us. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Mike.